here with Tile and Stone Journal. I'm speaking with Pete Brown from Bedrock Tiles, and we're going to have a little chat today about the commercial tile supply market in the UK. How are you
Hi
doing today?
everyone. Yeah, good. Thanks. And you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. I think we should
Excellent.
just get into it. So we're just
Okay.
over halfway through the year now. How's business been in 2022?
Well, it's been interesting, that's for sure. I come into the start of the year. Well, actually, we come late last year. It sort of started to change
Okay.
for the interesting slant of is we had the energy cry. We're coming out of COVID nicely late last year, and that was fine. Most of the industry, from what I could ascertain and who I spoke to, sort of gearing up to have a strong 2022. Then, as you know, we had the energy crisis hit in November,
Yeah.
which affected a lot of the producers over in Europe. So what they did was they offset their production slightly to just make enough and not too much surplus because of the cost of making it,
Sure.
with a view to go for it in the spring of this year and catch up. But with Russia invading the Ukraine in the February, kind of really put a spanner in the works to that plan. So from the supply aspect of the industry, business has been quite tough in terms of getting products, or more to the point, getting products on time
Yeah.
and getting products for what they cost last October. As well, how we work in our industry, in the commercial side of the tile industry, it's slightly different from retail,
Yeah.
is that we will talk about a project, say, last January, and that order for that project would come through maybe by the end of the year. So the projects we were working on in July last year, which were due around about now, at the time of this interview that we're chatting,
Sure.
we're finding that they were retendered in January by the contractors who don't like to lose money generally. And they've resubmitted their costs based on the new prices of labour, cost of fuel, cost of energy, cost of whatever. And it's caused an uptick in the price of projects. So what we've seen in the first half of this year is quite a bit of stagnation. In stagnation in the sense that the client maybe had a capex of £1 million to do their project,
Hmm.
but they got the requote through earlier in the year. That actually turns out now it's a million, it's 1.3 million. So they've got to go back to their bosses and get it signed off, the extra 300k, or they've got to just go ahead with it if they've got enough money in the pot. So we're finding there's been stagnation in the context that we're having to wait for them to go and get approval for more money. They're either not doing the project at all, or the third option is they're looking around to find better value for products that look like what they had but are a lot cheaper, which is all three of them are manageable. It's just knowing when they're going to start to happen and start to materialize in the fashion that we need to run a pipeline and a forecast for our business. So it's been a little bit up and down the first half of this year. So I don't
Sure.
think we're losing traction, but it has not been as plain sailing as we forecast it might have been looking into it from last October, November.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like uh, the the unprecedented scenarios that people keep talking about just kind of keep piling on one after the other. The next thing I
Yeah,
wanted to ask you about was the our kind of recovery as an industry out of the pandemic, and I think you've already
yeah.
alluded to this, but uh, the pandemic may be coming to an end in many ways, but that's by far not the only thing on people's agenda or people's plate at the moment. So if you could speak on
Well,
that.
I don't know. I had COVID last week, so
Yes, it's no, it's
it's
certainly
still
still
around.
affecting people. That's for sure.
I think. I mean, I had banter when COVID was sort of coming to an end in terms of its ferocity
Hmm.
last year, because I thought, we've had, since I've been in business for 11 years, I've had a financial crash, I've had a Brexit, I've had a 1 in 100 year pandemic, and I thought, what next?
Yeah.
excuse me, what next? You know, tsunami? Who knows? And then we got a war.
Yeah, you
That'll
couldn't
teach
predict
me.
it.
No, you couldn't write. Well, if you're into macro, if you're into global sort of looking around the globe, you could have predicted it. But on the face of an everyday newspaper, you wouldn't have seen it coming. No. And to be honest with you, no one really understood the extent of how integrated the Ukraine is into pretty much every industry in the globe, from grain to wood to the raw material for ceramics to zirconium, which makes the white pigments for all of the ceramics industry around the world.
Right.
You just could write a story on how integrated that country is into the global marketplace. So I think if you put that aside, coming out of COVID, the wheels were turning quite well up until late last year. But I think there's still a lot of apprehension in regards to how to deal with things like staff shortages. I mean, you only have to switch on the radio or the TV to see, how it's affecting the travel industry through airports or through the service sector. Well, it's the same through transportation. You get free drivers that get COVID, they've got to isolate, they can't travel. It means that 10 trucks, only 8 can leave. And you got to pray that your order wasn't on those trucks that didn't leave. So it is still it's got its foothold into the industry still. But what I found after 2 years, apart from not pressing spacebar when it's your turn to speak on Zoom, which I never seem to get the hang of, most people have started to adapt, work around it. I see around us here, a lot of the retailers in town are open. I think that people going back to work very much depends on the size of your company or your location.
Yeah.
So, for instance, coming out of COVID, you'll find that most of the offices in and around Birmingham are back to capacity,
Right.
whereas most of the offices in London are desperately trying to hold on to their hybrid and their staying at home ethos, which is starting to run thin with company directors, because in the industry we're working with architects, interior designers, developers, even to an extent fit out companies and main contractors who have design arms. They're going for a collaboration meeting on a Tuesday and finding that half the people that are supposed to be there with the samples are not there because they're working from home.
Sure.
So there's the frustration, and the traction is starting to build on that side of the COVID recovery and how we come out of it. So I think by the end of the year, people would have run thin with it, and I think hybrid will be very, very few and far between. But yeah, I think the industry is recovering quite well, and actually, I say that because it's strange to say. I say across the board, I feel it's recovering quite well, but it almost seems to feel that you're either doing very well or you're not doing very well at all coming out of the COVID.
Yeah.
And I just don't seem to see anyone who's sort of like, yeah, we're steady.
Yeah.
It's either we're killing it or we're losing it. And it's really is like a game of two halves. So it's an interesting one, but overall, balancing out the best and the worst, it tends to be, I think the industry is holding its own. The proof will be in the pudding by the end of the year, whether the industry can ride out the increasing costs being passed on to us from the manufacturers and from the haulage companies in turn.
Right.
I think we've seen 30% increase in cost from Italy, 20% from Spain and Portugal. And then on top of that, they now impose an energy surcharge or a fuel surcharge, whether it's a haulier or a manufacturer. So your costs are more like 35 or 15% respectively on an ongoing basis. So tied in together, that's a 50% increase on the product that was this time last year. And there's got to be a vacuum in perception of cost, which I've actually informed one supplier over in Portugal I won't name them obviously, but just this week, that we can't take those products into our portfolio because the perception of cost for a 600 by 300
Hmm.
is, let's say, for a round figure, £35 a square meter. I'm just pulling it out of the air.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, their cost now for us to buy it is €35 a square meter.
Right.
So instantly, I've got to put the price up, and remarkably, and
Yeah.
people will say, no, we, even for 20 years, we've gone from £25 to £35 as a market perception.
Mm.
We can't jump to
Yeah.
that price in 2 months because Russia invaded Ukraine. So there's going to be a vacuum where people turn around and say tiles are now too expensive for projects or for retail, and that's why I say the proof will be by the end of the year whether producers can get an energy supply that makes their product more competitive again,
Hmm.
or whether they stand fast and we become perceived as a luxury item rather than an essential item
Sure.
for a project. So yeah, there's a lot to think about coming out of COVID, the recovery. It's just how the industry refines itself. We're doing what we can for our customers, but there is a certain limit to what we can do to be
Sure.
commercially viable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That
yeah, I
that
think
cost has to get
that's
pushed along the line somewhere.
well, it does. We can only swallow so much,
Mm.
you know, before our kids start to go hungry, and we can't have that.
Yeah.
We're not in business to for the goodness of our hearts. We're in business to create a service, generate a good service, make a profit, and keep our staff in jobs and keep their livelihoods intact.
Yeah. Yeah.
we can we can take a hit for a while, but we can't take a hit forever. And whilst we've took a hit for 6 months of the year, we're now having to move the goalposts or shift the sands to start to be profitable again.
Sure. Sure. So you mentioned about the perception of tiles and the various challenges around kind of energy and supply of raw materials
Mm.
and stuff. Have you noticed any of that influencing kind of product trends? Have you noticed anything else around product trends? What kind of products people are going for in their projects over the last 12 months or so?
Um, Not necessarily. I did notice recently, it's a great thing to have on your interview actually. Whereas we had a few, about 3 years ago, Dulux, the color paint
Yeah.
people, announced their color of the year as being coral, like
Right.
pink.
Sure.
I know, nasty, right? Well, all of a sudden that caught our industry out because no one made
Mm.
pink tiles. Now all of a sudden we've got a flood of pink tiles everywhere. Whereas in the last 6 months to possibly a year for the pioneers, but 6 months to the mainstream,
Right.
all the producers have started to make and push a terrazzo look tile, a
Okay.
Chepo de Grez, or a terrazzo, or a whatever,
Sure.
Portobello, whatever it may be. And that's sort of, whereas the design industry pushed the trend of pink 3 years ago, our industry is pushing the look of terrazzo in a major way. I can almost tell an agent when he turns up, let's see your Chepo de Grez first. And they're like,
Sure.
how do you know we've got this? And it's so predictable. I don't know
Um,
how that's come about. I mean, I've been doing it for 16 years, tiles. So it's been the first time I've noticed a prominent
yeah.
trend push by our industry. But no, I think designers are still designing in accordance with the field, the look, feel, the needs, the requirements of their projects.
Yeah.
So whether they're doing a commercial office and the brand might be red or the brand might be green, then you would have to lend the design to that. So it's very much driven by what our clients want as opposed to what we feel they might want to buy.
Sure. Yeah. I suppose that makes sense.
So they're not in the design and architecture aren't changing the way they design. They are slightly in regards to sustainable design choices, of
Hmm.
course, but in regards to color, texture, shape, format, they're still being as creative as they ever were.
Yeah. that's fair enough. Cool. So another kind of question related to the COVID
Yeah.
pandemic, I suppose, in a fairly big way, yeah, is do you think that the industry is kind of moving away from kind of physical locations in terms of the supply and purchasing of tile, and more towards just kind of online selling and buying, or do you think that there's still like a big place for physical locations?
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, I definitely think there's cause for physical location, because the beauty with tiles is they're very tactile. People want to come and see them in person, although if they order samples, sometimes people are very visual
Yeah.
in terms of their in terms of their VAC personalities, visual, audio, kinesthetic.
Oh, sure.
People are very visual, so they'll want to come and actually see a display board, or they'll want to physically see 3 or 4 pieces of a marble effect tile to see how that pattern works
Yeah. Yeah.
in situ, because every single monitor brand and monitor style and type
Mm-hmm.
gives you a different RGB color representation.
Yeah.
So whereas we sell a lot of green, sort of grey tiles, they have a green hue to them, which people see as a grey, and it says it's a grey tile online, and they get a sample, and it's a small piece of marble, and they go, okay, I can kind of see the grey to it, but I need to see how the movement works.
Right.
And if they live locally to wherever the retailer or the commercial office is, then it's easy for them to just drop in and have a quick look, just to be sure, before they spend, over £1,000 on tiles,
Sure.
because it's a big investment. And it's not only a big investment, but it's a long lasting investment. They'll do this and it'll be a 10-year bathroom or kitchen or
Yeah.
hallway or commercial office or restaurant, whatever it may be. So they just want that added security of going somewhere, seeing it. And then in a lot of cases for us commercially, we have and invite and actively encourage main contractors and developers to come to our offices to check out our stability.
Right.
Because as you know, in the last year to 2 years, a lot of there's going to be a lot of what I call turbulence in the industry,
Sure.
where people just can't carry on.
Mm-hmm.
The detriment to the business of non-moving around will have really played a part, and they just will have to close.
Yeah.
So for a lot of main contractors that are about to give you £40,000, £100,000, they are going to want to come down and check you out before they make that investment on behalf of their customer, to
Absolutely.
make sure that you're going to supply them the tiles when they need it, if they have to pay you by pro forma.
Sure. I think.
So yeah, definitely, I think physical
Yeah.
premises definitely has a place to a part to play. Beg your pardon.
Yeah.
Well, teeth in.
Mm-hmm.
In the future of the industry. So whilst the high street is diminishing by the day, and my personal experience with this is the NatWest Bank.
Sure.
I used to have a pocket of different NatWest banks that I could pull up outside of, run in and do my business and run out. Now they've taken 3 away from Northampton in itself, where we're based.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go into town, which is an experience in itself, or into this other place. They've took the one away at the end of Hatton Garden in London. They've took the one away in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham. So they're taking away that kind of that convenience. But I don't think this will run through with the tile industry, because we tend to sort of go on to industrial parks. We
Yeah.
tend to veer out slightly out of town centres,
Mm-hmm.
just due to the nature of having stock, or having the ability to have Arctic lorries turn up to deliver your products from Europe. You need to get out on the road with a forklift. You can't do that if buses are driving up and down your high street. So yes, I think that a lot of people are going to start to look at their showroom presence or their high street presence, but I don't think it will overly affect things on the most part,
Right.
because we need space as tiling companies, but we also, and when we got the space, you would have the ability to invite people in to do that tactile presentation, or the checking out of, you know, your credentials, if you're on more commercial side. So I definitely think there's still legs in it. I just think that people are going to start to be a little bit more creative with the spaces they take or how they use those
Right.
facilities to maybe make them more than they are at the moment.
Sure.
For us, for our example of this, we have a commercial office and distribution centre here,
Hmm.
and we've been in this building now for approaching 6 years. And after the third year of people walking up, knocking on the windows saying, "Do you sell tiles?" Well, we didn't generally to the general
Right.
public
No.
before because of our business model. Whereas we're like, hang on a second, you know, business head on, there's pound notes here knocking on the door. So what we need to do is create a space within our space. And we built a showroom over the other side of the building so that we can actually have that retail focus
Yeah.
there now, and not get interrupted in the commercial office by someone not wasting, but taking up our time
Sure.
for what they want is completely different to what we do in and around the room I'm sitting in now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think there's legs in. So if people have got retail spaces and they're concerned about how it's going to work out, just advertise it. You know, get some road signs, get some advertising around town, sponsor a bus, do what you need to.
Advertise in a magazine, perhaps.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. TSJ is a great outlet, for people looking for credible information, for sure. So
Um,
you need that exposure.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think it was an interesting example you brought up with NatWest, because I think that is one industry that has really demonstrated over the past kind of 10 years that a huge amount of what the average person needs to do at the bank can be done online and really is functionally exactly the same. Whereas tiling, as you astutely kind of brought up and explained, is very different. There are a lot of things about a tile that you simply can't get from looking at it on a computer screen. So I'm
Yeah,
kind of with you that it doesn't really.
some people can do it. Some
Sure.
people can do it. You know, there's some online retailers that do exceedingly well,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
really well, you know,
Mm.
and it's just something that we've not had the time or the ability to spare to tap into.
Right. Dan, that's fair
Note
enough.
for
Yeah.
later.
Um, yeah. Fair enough. Okay. I was going to ask you about the kind of relevance of the office to the industry, but I do think that you kind of covered that quite comprehensively in an earlier answer. So I think if you're happy,
Yeah, it's critical.
yeah,
Get back to the office, everyone. Get
right,
back there. You've got sociability, you've got the ability to be seen, to be recognized, to be promoted. Um, and it's just generally nice to detach from home to work. When do you stop working? If you work at home, it's a hard thing if you've just got this extra thing to do, but someone over there is turning the lights out and the aircon off. You're going home.
yeah,
You'll have to do it in the morning. And if you can't do what you can do in a day's work, then we need more staff. You know, we're not a dictatorship. We're not, arch villains. You've got to have a good work-life balance, or you'll end up bald, fat, depressed, generally the kind of person that you don't want to be. So get back to the office, everyone. Forget your hybrids. Get into the office. It's
there you go.
liberating.
And the last question I was going to kind of touch on is there's obviously we've spoken about a lot of the challenges and a lot of the costs that are involved in the industry right now. A lot of kind of rising costs, a lot of these kind of issues. I want to ask: is there anything that you're doing for the kind of the people at the end of the chain, at least from our perspective, the tiling installers, the fixers, the contractors, to kind of help them out from your
Yeah,
end?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's a little bit the way I describe it to them when because we will specify with an architect the product that's aesthetically right, technically right, and cost consciously correct at the time of specifying. And bear in mind, you know, if we specified last year, those costs have gone up this year. So we're going back over our work as the tenders are coming in, and we're getting report back. Oh, it's too expensive, Pete. What can you do for us? Can you help us out? So yeah, it's the example I give is it's a bit like property development. Is in you actually make your money when you buy a property, not when you sell it. So it's all about knowing where to shop at what time to get the right value for that look and that tile.
Right.
Now we, like I said, we put forward tiles that are suitable and right for what the client needs. By the time it's gone through all of the build process and there's been accidents on site and there's been dramas and this and that, and there's been hands have changed in terms of contracts because of whatever's happened to the contractors, there's cost concerns, and that's the main thing. Is cost tends to be king at the end of a project. So we talk to people and we actively encourage them to call us up if they've been asked to save money, value engineer, cut costs, do whatever it is to bring that price down. Because we did the work at the top end with either the architect or designer, or even if they've been in our retail showroom and they picked a tile, fallen in love with it, but actually it turns out that once the fitting costs have been applied and this, that, and the other, it's too expensive. Mm-hmm. Well, we say, talk to us, because we know what that original tile was. We will have a plan B and a plan C that we would have found in the last year to be in keeping with the way that costs are shifting. So if you have a concrete tile that come out at £40 at the time of specifying or time of client wanting to buy it, actually at the time of purchase is now £48. Well, then we would have found a couple of other concrete effect tiles of the same size and finish that will be £38 or £40 from different countries or different producers. So we're actually ready for these moments of despair, and they will happen in the 11th hour. They've all got to be done. Sure. It's 4:50 on a Friday, and they've got to get the cost back by 5 p.m. So we're ready and we're wired to help people out on cost. That's just one aspect of it, though. Mm-hmm. I think as well, you can look at innovation to help cut costs. So, for instance, and I will name a brand here because they are actually pioneering in it. If you have an adhesive and you've spec'd an adhesive and actually you need to save money across the board on all sorts of things, then maybe why don't you look at something like Keracol's Biogel, which is half the material, twice the coverage. So instantly you have to buy less to get the same amount of coverage and you save money. It's on the face of it a slightly higher unit cost, but overall, sure, it will save money on a project. So is things like that, things like moving into a sustainable technology. So if you think, we've met a company yesterday, and I'll bring more details as I get them, but great guy, they're producing some leveling systems now, which you can actually reuse countless times. But also once you've kicked the leveling head off the actual spacer, you can then use the broken part of the spacer in a traditional fashion, because the overriding word in sustainable movements at the moment is reuse, not recycle. Right. Where we can reuse is much better than recycling. Recycling's been the go-to thing for 2 decades, but now actually, how can we reuse? Because in approximately 10 to 15 years from now, if we go at the same rate we are, there will be more plastic in the sea than there is fish. And this is consumables like spacers, like, you know, buckets, like trowels, sure, like all of those disposables. They're I could talk for hours on this, as you well know, but these are little advances that we can do to save cost. If you don't have to buy a bag of spacers or 500 bags of spacers because you're reusing these ones from the last 2 projects, you've saved money on that job. If you use a biogel, you save money because you're buying less adhesive. if you talk to us at the top end about the cost of the tile, it's not a dirty word at the moment. You shouldn't feel embarrassed to have to ask to save money or to honor your client's request to bring the cost of the project down. It's just natural. Following a trend out of the financial crash, out of Brexit, out of the pandemic, whereas costs go up as the cogs of economy start to move, inflation, something's got to give. So you shouldn't feel upset as a tile fixer or a tile supplier to hear the words, we need to save money.
Sure.
You should be expecting it and have a plan in place for it, like we do here at Bedrock. So I think that if any tilers out there or contractors out there are in this predicament where they don't feel confident in asking to save money, and they feel they might need to go to another supplier through the embarrassment of doing that, don't feel embarrassed. Just come and ask us,
Sure.
or ask the supplier that you've got on the sheet. It might be one of our competition. Ask them if they can save you the money, because it will be a lot quicker than trying to get another supplier to come in and do a tile or a product that technically performs or looks the same or is the right attributes to the client, be it an architect or an end user's wishes.
Yeah.
So a lot of our clients want sustainability, and a lot of people, as you know, we set up the sustainability working group at TTA now, to bring the education to people. So it's not so much of a taboo of people being scared of how to find or how to use that type of material.
Sure.
So I think there's definitely lots of ways that can be done to help people at the end of the chain. It's just about communication.
Yeah.
You just got to chat. It's good to chat, someone said once.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really nice sort of note to close on. There's
hope.
There's
always hope.
But you can you can always make them a little bit easier if you just communicate. Amazing.
Yeah, read the TSJ, talk around the industry.
Absolutely.
Honestly, it's full of really good stuff. Look, it's not ever far away from us.
There you go. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today, Pete.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I hope you have a good rest of the day and good rest of your year. Although hopefully I'll speak to you again before the end of the year. But yes,
we will.
Now,
we're doing a big sustainable feature in the TSJ in the August edition. So keep tuned, readers.
Also where this is. So you should be able to find that if you're watching this. You should be able to find that towards the latter half of the magazine. So yeah, keep an eye out. And fantastic. I will. I'll let you go then. And thank you once again for speaking with me. And great. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers, Alex. Thank you, mate.